Good afternoon, everybody. I am Chairman James Brown of the Montana Public Service Commission, or President, depending on which title you want to use these days. Thank you for being here and for this opportunity for the commission to receive some information this afternoon. I believe Vice President Johnson is on. Vice President Johnson.
I am here, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. And then I believe it looks like Commissioner O'Donnell is on.
Yes, I am, Mr. President. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. All right. Then without any further ado, Mr. Rowe, would you like to proceed?
Mr. President, members of the commission, thank you very much for making time for this discussion. And Vice President Johnson, congratulations on the great article in Public Utilities Fortnightly. That was well-deserved and very thoughtful remarks. The core of what we want to cover today, of course, is the enhanced wildfire mitigation plan. We did think it would be helpful to spend some time on storm update and then also on energy prices. Before we launch into that, I'd like our folks to very quickly introduce themselves, if we could, please. Brian?
Yeah, I'm Brian Bird, President Chief Operating Officer.
Kurt Pohl, Vice President of Distribution.
Oh, Greg Bailey, Asset Manager.
Just by way of introduction, what I would like to emphasize is really pretty well summarized on a slide you have a little bit deeper in the deck that talks about our programs to date. And going back certainly to when I joined the company and really before, we've taken a comprehensive approach to investing in the systematic modernization of really both our natural gas and our electric systems. The first milestone that's noted is what we call the Distribution System Infrastructure Plan, and that was both capital and expense, a significant incremental program, a lot of it having to do just with the basic renewal of the infrastructure, but also one of our first forward steps in terms of technology deployment, doing some very difficult work around GIS for the entire system, obtaining spectrum, and then moving forward into a number of subsequent plans that really focused on the entire delivery system end to end. And I think about just broadly all of those efforts as including a lot of data development and analysis, investment in renewing the system, increasing capacity in the system, giving our employees better tools to do their job, and certainly a significant commitment to technology. You've been in our grid operations center, our distribution operations center, our real-time trading desk, for example, and certainly those are facilities that came into play this week. So I would say that background or that foundation was very important in how our folks responded to the storms this week, starting with the straight line windstorm in the Hardin area on Saturday night, and then continuing with the Yellowstone River, Madison River, and on. Our people, as you know, did just an extraordinary job. I should say I received a call from Governor Gianforte yesterday, and he obviously was extremely engaged in what is going on and appreciative of the good work that our folks were doing to support our communities. In the same sense, each of the infrastructure plans we've had have had a significant commitment to things such as vegetation management, hazard tree programs. All of these efforts have depended for success on the support of the commission. So I think the commission can feel very good about what we managed to accomplish today. What Kurt will describe in terms of the storm response is a reflection of much of that good work. And then what Greg and his team will discuss in terms of the enhanced fire mitigation program really builds on what we've been doing for a decade. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kurt Pohl, our Vice President of Operations.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So we thought we would give you a brief update on some of the activities that have gone on this week. I guess to sum it all up, we've had a heck of a week. Those are, as Bob described it, obviously, these are the times where I think our people shine. They did an extraordinary job in pretty extraordinary conditions in multiple locations. And again, this is just a testament to their commitment in serving customers and so forth. I'm just going to talk briefly about the areas around Hardin, Montana, and then Red Lodge, where we had a lot of flooding. And then I'll touch on the national park and some of the things going on there. There's slides in the deck. I didn't intend to necessarily go through them all in detail. They're there more for your information, but there is a lot of good information in these slides. And then there's a handout that describes even in more detail each of these locations and kind of the events that happen. But I'll start with the theme. Honestly, things could have been a lot worse for us than what they were. We fared pretty well. I think the general theme is these communities. If you've seen the pictures, you've seen a lot of the devastation that they're going through, and so the communities, have taken it a lot harder, if you will, than what we actually sustained for damage. But started Saturday night with the microbursts that went through Hardin. We lost 9 structures on our 230 kV. I'll come back to that in a second, why that's a critical line for us. But we also sustained damage on our 115 kV in the area, and then multiple distribution outages. Honestly, we had most of the outages fixed by Sunday morning. So we really didn't have any customer impacts beyond Sunday, but the 230 being out obviously is a critical line for us feeding Billings. And with the warmer temperatures coming this weekend, we have to get that line back in service so that we've got adequate service for Billings. And to date, basically, we've got the structures all completed. We're a little bit further behind than what we'd like to be because, we had some pretty high winds again yesterday, but we fully expect to have that line in service by tomorrow morning. So we've had multiple crews working on that. As you guys are well aware, Sunday night, the flooding started in Red Lodge. We have 4 feeds, 450 kV feeds that feed Red Lodge. One of them was under construction. There was 3 in service. 2 of them got washed out on Sunday night. And so we were living on 1 feed into Red Lodge. And so that one washed out on Monday. So Red Lodge was in the dark as well as the surrounding areas. We actually had a generator that we had sent up there to hook up actually to serve kind of the surrounding areas of Red Lodge. When we lost the last feed into Red Lodge, we connected it so we could serve critical loads like the hospital, other commercial loads and so forth. But again, our guys, the creativity and everything, they were able to get a pole set away from the river. And so we were able to get service back into Red Lodge yet on Monday night. So again, they did a great job of getting that in. And then subsequently, they were able to get the other 2 feeds back in service as well. So right now, Red Lodge is being fed by three feeds that were there before the washout began. And everybody's back in service. So, unless things really materially change, we shouldn't have any more customer outage issues in Red Lodge. Also in Red Lodge, the flooding took out some bridges, and we had gas lines that were attached to those bridges, so we had to deal with that. and we were able to isolate the gas lines. In one case, it was a loop feed. So we isolated the line and no customers were out of gas service. In the other case, there was it was a radio feed. And so we've got a couple of customers that are out of gas service right now due to that. But obviously, again, if you've seen the pictures and you've seen all the damage that occurred, we had those two lines and we had another gas line that was eroded away, and we were able to stabilize that. So again, things are stable in Red Lodge for now. With the national park in Yellowstone, again, you guys seen the pictures, the devastation that went on there. We have a 69 kV line that feeds the park from Livingston down to Gardner. So for commercial power, the park relies on that feed. We also have generation interior to the park. So when we lose that line or other transmission feeds, we could serve most of the park with internal generation. On Monday, that line did wash out between Gardner and Mammoth. And so we did lose commercial power. On Monday, we were able to pick up most of the park with interior generation, all but Mammoth, really. And so, things were pretty tense there for a while. We, again, through the creativity and with the help of some helicopters, we were able to set a structure and fly conductor over the river and get that feed back in. So by Tuesday, we had commercial power back into the park again. And again, that's with the river receding and everything. So we're pretty stable with that feed right now. So obviously extraordinary events that happen. The other thing I would say again, I think, we fared pretty well considering, I just tell you that the flooding in Livingston is also pretty devastating. We don't have any issues in Livingston right now. But our neighbors, Park Electric, their shop is flooded right now. So we're in the process of trying to figure out if there's a way we can help them out so that they can get operations back up and running. So really that's kind of the update just from a storm activity. Again, there's several slides in here that go into more detail, but again, I'd just say pretty proud of our crew and how they handled everything. Extraordinary events. So there is a section in here on hydro. Maybe I'll just let Brian touch on that as well, because we had some impact to hydro operations as well.
Yeah, thanks, President Brown and Commissioners. John Hines wasn't able to join us today, so I'll cover that real quickly. I think the interesting thing at Hebgen last year, we were concerned with having low water levels at Hebgen. And in a very short order, we're dealing with extremely high levels of water at Hebgen. And so obviously for the Madison River Basin, how to manage that and manage flows downstream, but also manage flows at Hebgen Lake as well. And so we're dealing with that, try to optimize that as best we can, and obviously working with FERC and how we best manage through that. So far, so good. And the silver lining associated with that is, our hydro system starting at least there is going to be starting the season rather full. So that's good news. Mystic Lake also, we had within 12 hours, we had the reservoir there increased by 15 feet. So you can just kind of understand how quickly things happened there. We were pulling up boards along the dam itself to increase the flow, the spill, if you will, at the dam and managed that quite well. So the hydro system, obviously the hydro system's operating fine through this. We're very, very concerned with the very hot temperatures coming yet this week. That we'll continue to see, a swift melt off, which could impact the hydro system, but we continue to, I'd use the word stay on high alert in terms to manage that accordingly. So unless there's any questions associated with that's really the update on the hydro system.
Good. And all I would add then, just in terms of this first update, Governor Gianforte was asking very good questions about what we were doing. We're keeping his office informed, just as we're keeping the commission informed. Also, he, as you know, is focused on bringing to bear state and federal resources, was really concerned about both the safety and the economic impacts in communities such as Gardner. Similarly, in the park leadership who was doing everything they could to deal with the situation, keep their employees and visitors safe. We're really proud of the partnership we have with the state, with the communities we serve, and with the park. By coincidence, I was in the Mammoth area and further into the park and in Gardner late last week, kind of looking at the water. And the last thing I would say, Kurt touched on this just a little bit, the communities did an extraordinary job. I'm thinking particularly of how Gardner rallied to take care of visitors who were stranded. And you may have heard some of these comments too. Some of the folks who ended up sleeping in the church want to come back just because they were so well treated. So hopefully between the park and the state, that opportunity will be coming along as soon as possible. But truly everyone just shown, whether at the community level, in government, or all of the great folks we work with upstream and downstream. So I think that was an important addition to the meeting. But again, the core of what we want to report to you on today is the enhanced wildfire mitigation program. As I mentioned, this does build on work we've been doing for the last decade, and we'll turn it over to Ray.
Well, before I do that, let me see if commissioners have questions, if that's all right, Bob. Vice President Johnson, any questions on the storm update?
Nothing from me, Mr. President. I do appreciate the thoroughness of the update.
All right, Commissioner O'Donnell?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, good. Sometimes the phone just shuts off. I did want to pass on to the people there that I was at a luncheon yesterday, and one of the people there had a home right above one of the bridges that washed out. Said that the Northwestern people were right on it, and they took care of things very, very professionally, and they were very impressed with that. And I thank them on behalf of the company. I thank them for that. I just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you very much. That means a great deal. We'll turn it over to Kurt Pohl to set up the next section.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So we'll transition to the enhanced wildfire mitigation. It kind of seems a little odd to go from flooding discussion to fire discussion. So I'm just gonna flip this forward. So I'll just touch.
Can you excuse me a minute? Let me go back if I could. I had a question, and you're all familiar with the research that Commissioner Pinocci is doing on the line upgrades, and I just wondered if you had those lines strengthened in the hardened area for the microburst. Do you think that might have made any difference right there? I'm not aware of what the damage was to the stands, to the wires, to the connectors, or wherever that damage was.
In my opinion, obviously there's analysis that's always ongoing with new technology and so forth, but the microbursts that we experienced in Hardin, and the Billings paper reported it in excess of 100 miles an hour of wind, and the way the damage occurred, where it just basically took out the structures. I can't imagine that a different kind of conductor would have made any difference in that particular instance.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that, as I have expressed before, that the efficiency of the system is very important, and the general topic of discussion has been under the heading of hardening of the transmission system. And I particularly am very, very interested in any efforts the company is doing to make the system more resistant to to occasional damage. Thank you.
I would just make a quick comment, and Bob touched on this. Actually, it's a good segue into some of the work that we've been doing, you know, which actually helps us in the wildfire planning as well. But as Bob stated, you know, over the last decade, we've invested a lot in infrastructure, starting with the distribution system infrastructure project, and then all of, we call them our SIPs, our system infrastructure projects, but our transmission infrastructure project, our substation infrastructure project, and so forth. And to your point, Commissioner O'Donnell, you know, that has gone a long ways in hardening our system. And and if you talk to linemen that have been around for 25, 30 years, they would tell you that when we have these types of events, if those would have occurred 15 years ago, we had been tore up and been at it for a lot longer. So I think the investments that we've made have definitely improved reliability and have improved our ability to improved our infrastructure's ability to withstand those kind of storms. And we're continuing to do that. And that's what Greg and his team do with the asset management. They analyze data and are constantly looking at ways in which we should be prioritizing investments to do exactly what you're talking about. So just by way of setting up the enhanced wildfire mitigation plan, Bob touched on it again. You know, there's been a lot of activity that we've been doing. Fires are nothing new to us. You know, we've been dealing with fire mitigation for some time. What's different is probably the changes in the environments and how we have to deal with things. And Greg will get into this, but I just say that the team that is sitting here now, Greg's going to do most of this talking and present our enhanced wildfire mitigation plan, but he's joined here by Nate Linder, who runs our vegetation management program, which is a critical component to fire mitigation. And then Randy Hellwinkle is our manager of system integrity, who she works with Greg, very diligently. And again, the use of data and what we do with data is extremely important. And it's certainly a part of how we built the enhanced wildfire mitigation plan. I would tell you, we've been doing a lot, but there's a lot more we could be doing and should be doing, especially when you get into situational awareness and some of the other things that have come upon us now. And that's what you're going to see in this plan is I think we built a good plan, but now it's time that we need to step up our game, if you will. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Bailey, who's our manager of asset management.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner O'Donnell, and Chairman Brown. As I introduced myself earlier, I'm Greg Bailey, our asset manager, and I'm here with our team that's going to go through the enhanced wildfire plan. I'm glad Kurt pointed out the irony that we're moving from floods to fire so quickly. Anyway, what I'm going to talk to you about, and I'll go through the slide deck up on here, is we'll talk about our current practices, give you a system overview, some of the programs we've been working up on to date that led to the development of the plan and why we needed to develop an enhanced plan. And that's that understanding wildfire risk. There's some changes going on, pointing out those changes and trying to understand how to impact that risk that's growing. And then we'll get into actually what the enhanced wildfire mitigation plan is on there. So in our current practices from the agenda, I'm going to give you the system overview. And what you're looking at here on this slide is the two maps depicting our distribution and transmission. What's important to understand about this is the rural nature of our assets and how our strategy's got to match that rural nature. You see the little insert down on the bottom, about 70% of our system serves 20% of our customers. So that should tell you that we got a lot of lines that are sitting out in the rural areas that are prone to wildfire. And that's what makes this important. And then the other note over there, you can see on the circle and the transmission, we are working with Yellowstone National Park to build a plan that suits their needs as opposed to what we're building for the state of Montana, but they're going to follow each other probably pretty closely. So then the next one is our programs to date that we went through. So the historical system infrastructure programs, the big one was DSIP that Bob hit on and Kurt hit on, and that was the infrastructure, the asset stabilization investments that we made from 2010 through 2018. And, you know, that was really foundational to being where we're at today to moving on. A lot of that was built with reliability in mind. You get a lot of side benefits from risk mitigation on wildfire, but they weren't strictly focused on mitigating risk. That's just something that came along with it. If you can eliminate the outages, you got a good chance at eliminating the number of faults and ignition sources too there. But it was important to point out a lot of the stuff that we did, and with your guys' support of getting that done, has put us in a good position to move forward. Current programs we got going on, they mentioned the other SIP programs, TSIP and SSIP, you know, looking at almost 6,000 poles being replaced on that transmission system through that TSIP. Substation infrastructure program, a lot of component-based individual pieces in there. You know, you look at them, you start building asset strategies, and a lot of the analysis comes from, you know, the two gamuts you can run to failure or just in time, or building that to replace your assets at the right time. And that's a lot of what that system infrastructure for substations is about. And then on our reliability and asset life programs, which again, like I said, are focused on reliability, we got our traditional distribution pole replacement program where we go through and do a test and treat and analysis on our poles about 10% a year, which is trying to get through our entire system every 10 years and replace the poles that come back that don't meet our standards as having adequate strength. And then our section reliability, and I'll hit on this a little bit because it'll lead into our forest management program, but that's where we looked at when we got circuits that are underperforming. It's not as easy to go through and just replace the whole circuit, nor probably should you. And so what we were able to do was develop a strategy to break a circuit down into smaller sections by protective devices, fuses or smart switches, and start looking at a targeted reliability approach. Where are the worst parts within that circuit? Maybe the whole circuit is not being called for a complete replacement, but you got parts where you can focus on targeted areas and improve the reliability greatly. And that's that section reliability. And I just wanted to get a little bit into that because it's going to lead into the forest management piece I'm going to hit on. So then on the end part, the 2019 to current, and actually probably 2018 to current, is the wildfire risk focus programs. Now those ones, rather than just reliability focus, were more at that risk-based mitigation focus. And first one is a hazard tree. That one started in 2018, and it was designated to be a 3-year program that we wrapped up in 2021 of last year. And I got a couple slides on that, so I won't spend too much time on this one here. And then the other one's a forest management program, and that follows suit very closely with the section reliability that I just described. But what we did is added in another component of environmental consequences. Where are these lines that are in our forested areas? What kind of customer impacts do we have? How many homes are on these lines? Do we got single egress access points, things of that nature that we'll get into in some later slides on that. Okay, sorry about that. I thought this was an embedded video that told a really good story on the work that Nate and his group was doing on the hazard tree front for the pine beetle mortality. So without that video playing, I'll go ahead and move on with the next one. So getting into the hazard tree program on there, this was a program where we started to recognize the mountain pine beetle mortality and infestation. What you're looking at here is a map that we got from the Forest Service, kind of highlighting the biggest pockets and areas of where we had mountain pine beetle mortality rates. And what it hits on here, and if we had the video to play, Scott Bernhardt, who works for Nate Linder, does a really good job explaining danger trees to hazard trees. But to sum up on there, a danger tree is any tree on or off our right of way that has the potential to reach our line should it come down. And then a hazard tree would be taking that danger tree and finding some kind of defect in it. And Scott walks through that in the video. It's basically a structurally unsound danger tree on there. And that's what that a hazard tree program was built around. Let's walk through our system. and find out where these are and mitigate that risk. And so when we take that last data that you guys just talked about, and Kurt was hitting on the importance of using the data to help us identify the things that we need to go do and where they're targeted, we overlaid that with our system. And on your maps, you can see there we got our transmission on the left and the distribution on the right. And where that pine beetle mortality data overlapped with ours, you can see the lines turn red. And so what we estimated from the data side, which data will get you really close there, but you still got to go out and do the work to get it nailed down, is we figured there'd be almost about 1,100 miles that are pretty impacted by that mountain pine beetle. So we set out with a program. I know you guys were pretty familiar with it, went through the PSC on that. And what was a good news story on this is we went and identified about 1,100 miles, told you guys what it would take to get that done. We went out and through Nate's leadership, managed that project through there. And this is a scope and schedule overview of that project. And we said we'd be around 18.6 million. That was 18.8 million. And we had 1,200 miles mitigated. So in that 3 years, we got done what we said we were going to get done at a very close target to what we said it was going to take to get through it.
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Mr. Vice President.
I apologize for interrupting, but is it possible to screen share these slides? All I can see on my surface is the monitor behind you, and I can't make out any of the detail.
Can you see it now, Mr. Vice President?
Yes, thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.
I think we had a pause here. They were going to get the link over onto that so we could watch that video.
What's the length of the
3 minutes.
what's the length of the hazard tree program? Is it an ongoing program? What did we authorize? I was not on the commission at that point in time.
I'll let Nate address that. He was more involved.
Sure. The original hazard tree program set up with that scope was from 2018 through 2021, so a 3-year program. We've continued to kind of refine the factors that define that hazard tree program and are continuing to invest in that.
While we're on a pause, let me also add my appreciation for the work that was done at Northwestern Energy to mitigate the storm situation that we've had in Montana the past few days. I would certainly echo the comments that were made by Governor Gianforte and our expressing our commission appreciation for your mitigation work. It's pretty remarkable that as we sit here today, that most services have been restored to Montanans who have experienced difficulties of the storm. It's a real credit to how you operate. And so I appreciate what you've done. I also appreciate the fact that we have this opportunity to have this timely update, to say the least. It seemed to have worked out fortuitously for you to be coming in here to have that update. You ready? Go ahead, Patricia.
I'm Scott Bernhardt, Manager of Vegetation Management for Northwestern Energy. We're out today on a job site north of Butte, about 10 miles, and gonna talk a little bit about what's happened to us over the years with the mountain pine beetle and the effects it's had on our right-of-ways. This started very slow, where we were seeing just pockets of bug kill, and now it's affecting approximately 9 million acres in Montana. Currently, we believe we have 11 to 1,300 miles of line just affected by the mountain pine beetle. Distribution right-of-ways, we're definitely having to take down more trees than we do on the transmission side to mitigate the situation. Make sure we're not starting a fire or having reliability issues with our customers. Danger tree is any tree that has a target. In our case, the target would be a power line. A hazard tree is a structurally unsound danger tree. The defects that we look for out here are dead, dying, leaning, codominant tops. Back in the mid-2000s, we were seeing 2 and 3 trees a span, and then it exploded to a spot where we're now clearing hundreds and hundreds of trees a span. I've always been a fan of having the equipment out on the right of way. I always felt that one machine would outwork 4 or 5 hand crews. Trying to be smart with how we're spending our money. Try to get more trees on the ground for less dollars here, if at all possible. Because of trees going through the wire at different times, different storms, wind events, some spans we've counted up to 20 splices in. When we're out removing as many hazard trees as we are in a certain area, we can't leave a lot of the green ones. We've taken down so many dead and dying around them. The root system's never ever expanded to a point where that tree will stand by itself. In this area, there's some recreational cabins, and we were only allowed to cut the dead and dying at the time. We did that. You can see we got to come back and just have a ton of work to do again. Unfortunately, most of these trees are opened up to the wind now and probably will fail during a wind event. So we're going to have to come back through here and take these green trees down after the fact, now that we have permission to take them down. This area was logged, I believe, in 2009. As you can see, there's a lot of young, new, healthy lodge pole coming back on the right-of-way. This would be really easy for us to maintain at this point. We're down in the Gallatin Canyon talking about a different issue that I think as a utility forester I'm going to be faced with here in the near future. I wanted to visit a little bit about the spruce budworm and potentially the Doug fir beetles. We're just seeing large pockets of these infestations, complete mortality in some areas. There's no telling how big it could get. It's got the potential to be as big as the mountain pine beetle epidemic or larger, possibly.
Son, we're grabbing burgers for dinner if you're interested.
I'm
You didn't recognize me? All right, so will we be going through on this? I probably won't be able to control it. Correct? Yes, I can. Thank you. All right. So that video is what we wanted to cover before we got into this hazard tree piece. So the next part on the risk mitigation programs that we're doing is that forest management program. And I explained to you guys the ESID and how that works. We break up the circuits into smaller targeted areas and use the data that's available to us to find out within this larger circuit, what's the smaller pockets that are actually causing us some issues. So we used that and overlaid it with some wildfire hazard potential data that we were able to obtain from the DNRC, our forested versus non-forested areas on there. And what we found is from our 13,000 miles on our distribution, we have about 3,000 miles in the forested areas. And we did a scoring program there where it talks about the 998 miles above our risk threshold of 42, and I'll get into that in just a minute on the next slide. Same story on the transmission. As opposed to breaking it up, we did a polygon drawing of where our transmission runs through the forested areas on there. And again, out of that 6,500 miles of transmission, we had about 873 that were in those forested areas. So what we wanted to do was set up a scoring system and a risk ranking on there to understand where is our higher risk areas. And so the two pieces we used for both transmission and distribution was to look at system performance. And this is a Tableau screenshot of a Tableau dashboard where we use this data. Brandy and her team were instrumental in creating these dashboards. It really racks and stacks all the data from multiple sources. That gives us an ability to sort and get right down to the targeted areas we want to look like, or excuse me, we want to look at. So the yellow boxes across the top up there, those would be our system performance. So they're looking at things like how many outages did you have in this area on this line? How many conductors do you have? How much equipment do you have on the poles? Things of that nature. What's the pole rating from the last inspection that we did? And we coupled that with environmental or consequence scores. And a lot of that is how many customers live within so many miles of this line? Are they single egress access points? What's the wildfire hazard potential in there? And it comes up and we're able to score all those. And you can see that overall score on the right where it ranks them. We had them ranking from 5.6 to 76.8. And then on the left, you can see a mitigation year. We started grabbing on that one. It has what year we mitigated on it, or if it's up, and you can see that we've got through quite a few on this first page, but we started this program in 2020, and by year end 2022, we'll have completed 80 distribution sections going through there and 24 transmission sections. And so I'll talk about what we do from an engineering standpoint on that. So we risk rank and hand this over to our construction folks, and they'll go out and do a survey on that section as it sits today, and they'll read past comments from outages where linemen went on and they make a comment about the line, and they'll go through it and they'll model that line as it sits today, sitting out there, and see if it's up to current standards. Is it meeting what we have? Are we having blowout issues from the conductor? Are we having galloping issues? Other things. They also take a look at vegetation encroachment, and they'll get Nate's group involved on that. And they'll come through some kind of an engineering analysis and corrective action. And those things run from no corrective action. They model it. It's meeting all today's standards. And we've found quite a few of them out there that they pass the test. We're good with what we're dealing with, to where we have a complete rebuild. This one, we need to start over and do this one differently. And so you can see those are two other screenshots on there from the distribution on the top left and the transmission on the bottom right. So that natural progression of 42 and 40 score that I was talking about, that was just the natural fall line between the green and the red. And that's just an automatic weighting system and coloring system it gives to show you where your highest ones are first. So we decided to snap that line at 42 and let's focus on those top higher risk ones first on there. So that's our forest management program, things that we're doing. So now I'm going to get into the development of the plan, the wildfire that we've been dealing with. And that first comment up there talks about ignition prevention, resiliency to wildfire. And really what we're getting at there is dealing with the risks of wildfire from owning and operating electric utilities in wildfire prone areas is not new to Northwestern Energy. We've been doing this for quite a long time. But what we did start to understand here is there a way that we can get organized in all the different activities we're doing from across all our different departments, transmission, distribution, hydro, even gas transmission? They got protocols to follow when we get into a high fire threat season. In there, can we get that organized and see where we got opportunities to improve? So in helping us do that, we joined the Pacific Northwest Utility Wildfire Working Group. And that's that acronym up there. And it's a bunch of utilities across the Northwest. And we met with those guys, and they had a category model that they were using, kind of breaking down all the stuff that they're doing. And the categories they used were situational awareness, wildfire hardening. Wildfire hardening is getting your system built to a point where it can withstand a fire, whether you start it or somebody else does. How well does it withstand? The assessment and repair programs are really, that's vegetation, that's going out and rebuilding your line. That's really trying to prevent the ignition. You got your operational practices when you get into a high fire threat season, or even if you're in a wildfire itself. How are you gonna direct your crews and how they're gonna operate and they're gonna do their work practices? And then the last one was that public safety power shutoff programs. And I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that or what they've been doing in other areas where they're looking at hot, dry, windy weather, and they're proactively just shutting the power off to large swaths of the population to avoid the risk of starting a fire. And you can imagine that probably comes with its own set of, I'm struggling with the word, but comes with its own set of problems anyway, you're going to have to deal with when you just start shutting the power off. So we looked at that and we started to organize our own categories, and we used some of the same: situational awareness, operational practices, system preparedness. So we took the hardening and the assessment and repair programs, brought them all in together into a system preparedness, which is not only hardening and preventing it, but it's also building the system, getting it prepared to take on new technology as it becomes available to help you prevent these wildfires or manage this risk. One thing we did do is we pulled vegetation management out to the side. It's kind of almost its own monster, if you will. It's very big, very fast, and we didn't want either of them to become distractions to each other. And so we split those out. And then instead of a public safety power shutoff program, which really is an operational practice, we developed the public outreach and communication. That's how we're going to work with our customers if we're in the event of a fire on there. And we use these categories then to develop a gap analysis of what we do compared to the other utilities in the PNU WWG, that wildfire working group. So the categories we compared against was our strategies and initiatives and programs we do on our transmission system and our distribution system, kept them separate, and then compared them against what those groups in the PNU WWG do. And the scoring we used was a 1 through 6, 1 being your plan's fully developed, but you're in various stages of implementation. You might have it shovel ready, sitting on the shelf, but you haven't done anything with it, or you're in full implementation. 5 being an opportunity. It's looked at a 0 level. What kind of value would it add to us and our customers to pursue something like that? And then obviously 6 being a not reported or an unknown. And what we found is we're sitting pretty good. We've done a lot of good things. I think it's attributed to a lot of those programs I talked about in the beginning, the DSIP, the SIP, and the TSIP, that got us to the position we're at, where we're sitting in a pretty good spot with that. However, I'm going to get into the understanding the wildfire risk, because you're probably starting to ask is what's changed, what's going on out here. And we know things are changing out there. So I'm going to start getting into the understanding the wildfire risks in here. So what this graph depicts, is it's from NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, but they're doing a prediction here on, this is really a climate change prediction of an increase in weeks with risks of very, very large fires. And what they're looking at is they believe up in the Montana area, and you can see where I got it circled up there, that we could be facing somewhere upwards of a 600% increase in the number of weeks with a risk to a very large fire. Whereas you look at California down there, there's not as much red. And what that's telling you is they're already in a 48 to 52 week fire season. They got risk of fires 12 months a year down there. Ours traditionally used to be, mid-July till mid-September. Sometimes it shift back and forth, but it was always around like that 8 weeks, some years 10 weeks, some years we didn't have any fires. But they're saying it could be upwards of 48 weeks where we got this problem where we're sitting on pins and needles worried about hot, dry, windy weather. The other data on here is the population growth in the WUI, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the WUI, but that's the wildland urban interface. Good way to describe it is just right here in the South Hills and Helena. You got a lot of people moving into that wildland urban interface. This study was conducted across the Western US, and what they're saying is not only is there a big population increase going into the WUI, if you break the WUI down into a high, medium, and low hazard area, the highest hazard is the fastest growing area where more people are moving into. So you got this coupled of longer fire seasons and more people moving into the woods. That's increasing your risk. So is what you've been doing going to be enough to continue what you need to do? That's where we want to start looking at. So the next couple slides is, do we have any of our own data that can kind of corroborate that? What you're looking at here, and I got 2 slides that tell the same story. This first one is really an aggregated view of looking at where we've had distribution outages, where our linemen have put the word fire in the comment. Now, obviously, our linemen aren't out dictating who started the fire, right? They're just putting in there that there was a fire involved, and we were either a victim to the fire or possibly the cause of the fire. But what we could see as we were stacking these is kind of correlates with that first slide I was showing you on that map of the United States. We're starting to see more and more of these come in the earlier seasons. So another way to look at that is if we took that same data from 2016 through 2021 and we filtered out everything except for June, July, August, and September, and that's the graph on the left, we're in that 40 to 50 range of where we've captured this. And you could say flat, even declining trend line. We don't have 2022 data. That trend line might come more up to flat. But what's interesting is when we take those months out and we look at April, May, October, and November, you can see the trend lines increasing. So that would tell you that, yeah, we're probably looking at an increasing fire season that's going to become more and more problematic. So then along with understanding the wildfire risk, where is this stuff? So I talked about the forest management program, and yes, that program is focused on our facilities in the forested areas, and probably rightfully so. But the enhanced mitigation plan we got to look at, and I'm sure everybody's aware of this room, is we do have issues with grass fires as well. And that one was looking at forested areas. And what this data here would show, the two maps, one on the left, one on the right, are the same maps, but one shows our transmission, one shows our distribution. And the tan is non-forested areas and the green is forested areas. And that came from the DNRC. And then those polygons or amoebas, I'm not sure what you'd call those shapes in there, those are historical fires that have burned. And the darker the red, the more recent the fire. And those are fires from 84 to 2020. But as you can see, the vast majority of them do happen in the forested areas. And that forest management program was looking at that kind of data. So now that we understand these risks that we got coming to ourselves, how can we impact these risks? So we started looking at what do we want to do in this enhanced wildfire mitigation plan that's going to help us. And, some of the key things we had to understand is, first off, whatever we do, we got to make sure it's measurable so we can show that what we were doing. Is it attainable? Is it something that we can do? And is it providing a positive impact on reducing the risks that we face? So we started looking at things we can control and things we cannot control. Some of the things we can control is our situational awareness. We can increase our situational awareness based on how the environment's changing around us. What that does is that can drive our changes in operational practices. Other things we can work through are programs to reduce ignition potential. We can collaborate with external stakeholders. There's a lot of really smart people out there that do this for a living, and we can work with them and get some really advanced technology into helping us manage some of this risk mitigation. And that's what I talk about on the next one, technology implementation. Once you find it, getting it implemented where it makes sense. And then improving our customer impacts and our communications when we do have a fire and making sure people are aware of what it is that we're doing. And then, lastly, but still pretty important, making sure we build a plan that we can make changes to quickly if needed as the situations change. Some of the things we cannot control, and we have immediate climate impacts. We're not talking about climate change impacts there. What we're talking about is a hot, dry, windy Chinooks that come up. When they come, we really don't have a lot of control over when they come. We don't have any control over the population growth in the WUI. People want to come in, buy land and build a house. That's their right to do so. The problem is that also spreads us out into our dispersed rural assets that we're going to have to manage. And then obviously, as you guys saw from the video, there's going to be forest health cycle changes that we can't control, but we still got to learn to deal with. So that brings us into this enhanced wildfire mitigation. So that, I hope, answers the why. Why are we doing this? We got these things building up. We're going to need to do something. And so we set out with 4 main objectives. And obviously, the first one's pretty obvious, reduction of ignition potential. And that's not just preparing our system not to reduce ignition, but another way to look at that too is changing our operational practices. Do we need to be working in the forest at certain times? Can we change the way we do our work and when we do our work to maybe not inadvertently start a fire from work activities? The other one is our system environmental monitoring. How can we get better at knowing what's going on out there in the forest and be able to react to it faster? Third one, enhanced vegetation management. What can we do out there to improve our vegetation practices? And then also working with public communication and outreach with the stakeholders involved, and including our customers. So we use those 4 objectives to kind of guide us through and put us into an enhanced wildfire plan that fits into those categories I described earlier when we started organizing what we already do today. So on here, we got varying degrees of low hanging fruit, if you will. Situational awareness, we believe, is kind of some low hanging fruit. We got a lot of opportunity to provide some benefits by doing some investments in our situational awareness. Operational practices, as I said earlier, we've been dealing with how we operate in the forest for a pretty long time, but we still got some opportunity to improve from that standpoint. And then, interestingly, when we went through this, the system preparedness stuff, we found we got some improvements we can make, but they weren't as probably drastic as some of the other ones. And I think that really attributes to the DSIP and the TSIP and the SIP programs where we've been investing in it. Picked a lot of that low hanging fruit. Now we got to reach up a little higher into the tree. Speaking of trees, vegetation management, we can get into and start improving a lot of the practices that we do, if not accelerating them. And then the last one, what are some opportunities for communication and outreach into our communities? And one of the interesting ones in here was a lessons learned from some of the public safety power shutoffs that some other utilities did, where they'd go through and shut off power and realize they didn't really have what they would call a resiliency zone. They'd shut off power, carte blanche. So you're losing your sewer lift stations, your water plants, your grocery stores, your gas stations. And what they realized quickly is we need to set up some mobile generators for some resiliency zones. We got an opportunity to probably design and build some and apply it the same way, maybe not from a proactive shutoff, but if we do have a weather event that impacts our customers, we can utilize some of that. So that was a really quick rundown of the wildfire plan. At this point, before we move into the energy, I think is the next slide on here. If there's any questions, I think we'd be open to entertaining those, unless you got something you want to add, Brian.
I'll see if there's questions first.
All right, Vice President Johnson, any questions?
Nothing from me, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes, thank you. I'm interested, how much, if any, of your system is self-insured or commercially insured? And if it's commercially insured, do you get benefits from the diligence that you have applied to this?
That's a great question, Commissioner. We do have wildfire coverage. Matter of fact, we're working with our insurance carriers on the Denton fire last year. We will be covered for that particular fire and working through that. And to your point, for any aspect of insurance coverage these days, the insurance carriers, they do their due diligence in terms of the risk that they're actually covering. And so from a physical standpoint, in terms of how we manage our system, it's extremely important in terms of the pricing that we actually pay. And so this program and the programs that we've done in the past have helped us to get adequate coverage at a reasonable price. And so as that coverage gets to be harder and harder to receive because of payments the carriers have been making, I think there's been a recognition in terms of what we've been doing in the past. And hopefully as we continue to share this with our carriers on a going forward basis, we should be able to continue to get decent coverage.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner O'Donnell? Well,
I just wanted to express that I'm quite impressed. The presentation, all of the depth of it would certainly indicate to anybody listening to this that the company cares deeply. This is not just window dressing. This is a real commitment, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Go ahead if you'd like to address it.
Thank you, Mr. President, I guess. And Commissioner O'Donnell, I appreciate your comments. The commissioner was at a conference I spoke at a couple of weeks ago here, and you may recall that I said it's pretty impressive for a company of our size and the service territory that we serve, the size of the service territory and how it's sparsely populated. We have to cover all those areas, and that we can do that, with pricing that's better than the national average and reliability that's better than the national average. It's pretty impressive. And I think these two presentations thus far today are certainly why everybody in this room is proud of what we do, not just the reaction that we did during the week, but the planning that this team just demonstrated for you in terms of what we've done in the past and what we're doing forward. We feel really good what we're doing from a company perspective to deal with the risks that face us and our customers. If I could, we're actually ahead of time, believe it or not, President. We're going to transition to energy prices. I think as we've seen commodity prices, particularly impacting natural gas prices and ultimately how that impacts electricity prices, we'd like to bring up Kevin Markovich, the director of our energy supply group. And they introduced themselves here quickly, but I'll let Kevin introduce his team. Luke and Doug are going to join us up here to give you an update on energy prices.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. President, I did have one other question that I would like to, since we're ahead of schedule right here, intervene, and that is that in my lengthy prelude to the question, I forgot the question. It'll come back to me. I apologize.
Well, you're saving us time right there, Commissioner O'Donnell. Go ahead, Mr. Marcus.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Just to refresh everybody, I'm Kevin Markovich, Director of Energy Supply Market Operations, and Doug Peoples is the Manager of Energy Supply, and Luke Hansen is the Manager of Natural Gas Supply. Last week, I was notified about this meeting, and I was asked if I would put together a 20 to 30-minute presentation to update everybody on electric prices and the movements in the markets. And so I started the presentation, and then it just dawned on me that, I could do that and give an overview, but why wouldn't I let the people who live in these markets, who transact in these markets, who are intimately involved with them every day, make that presentation and give you the firsthand knowledge? To put it in perspective, Doug runs the electric supply shop. And from a revenue requirement standpoint, we run close to $500 million a year through his shop. He's responsible for hourly trading, day ahead trading, term trading, transmission, scheduling, balancing, and reliability. In any one day, he could manage up to 288 trades a day, 12 an hour, 24 hours. That equates to over 105,000 separate transactions. With that responsibility, he must know the market and must know the situation. To give a flavor for what Luke's responsible for, we run over $100 million of natural gas supply through his shop. If you add on South Dakota and Nebraska, that's probably another 60 million. So he's got roughly $160 million of customers' money that he must manage. He must know transportation, storage, weather, national events, everything that factors these markets. So with that, I'm going to hand that over to Luke first. He'll talk about the natural gas supply markets, and then Doug will take over on electric.
Talked about the breadth of those responsibilities.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, Kevin. What we're going to talk about today are the natural gas prices, electric prices, how much they've increased, and also the effect of those increases on our customers' bills. So this first slide that we're looking at, it represents the AECO natural gas market. The AECO production market is a production market in Canada where we transport the natural gas down to serve our customers, and it represents about 70% of our Montana core supply. Looking at this graph, we have the historical natural gas prices in gray, and then futures prices as shown in blue, red, and black, taken from different time frames. But what we'd really like to focus on is the significant increase that we've seen in the natural gas prices. Looking just from the beginning of last year, prices are up over 200%. They're up over 100% from the beginning of this year. And we haven't seen prices like this since really 2008. The Colorado Interstate Gas Pipeline it's a pipeline that interconnects to the south end of our system. We use that during the winter to help serve our customers in Bozeman. Very similar to what we saw in AECO market, these prices are up significantly, And if we look at 2 winters ago, we had a price of less than $3. It's anticipated this summer to, or excuse me, this winter to be near $10. Each week, the Energy Information Administration releases a weekly report detailing the amount of natural gas that has been injected or withdrawn on a weekly basis. It's a rolling 5-year average. And as shown on this chart, the gray line represents the average of the 5 years of storage inventory, with the shaded area above and below. They represent what those minimum and maximum values are. And the blue line represents the current storage inventory. And you can see at the end of February, typically when we get to the end of injection, at the end of withdrawal season and start to inject, we were well below the 5-year average. We had colder weather in April and May, and we have had much warmer than normal weather in the southern end of the United States at the beginning of June. So what that's really done is we're behind on the 5-year average, and it's very tough to catch up. So there's a lot of concern in the market that we may not have enough natural gas stored for winter. And it's really pushing those prices higher. That's why we're starting to see those prices go where they're at. A couple other reasons why natural gas prices are increasing. In addition to the storage, we have a lot of natural gas is used for electric generation. The summer forecasts are for hotter and drier forecasts this summer. And in addition, the coal inventories are quite a bit lower than normal. So what that's going to mean is that there's going to be more demand on natural gas to meet that electric generation load, as opposed to perhaps hydro or coal to gas switching. Additionally, LNG exports are a significant story in today's natural gas market. While Mexico doesn't get a lot of the press that Europe and Asia get, we have 6% of our daily supply is going to Mexico. So it's certainly not insignificant. And then Europe and Asia, the prices over there are significantly higher than the US. We have prices near $30 per decatherm in Europe and Asia. So we are, we have record LNG exports, and we'll continue to have those for the foreseeable future. I do think it is interesting if we just look at the natural gas market maybe 15 years ago versus what we look at today. 15 years ago, the majority of the demand for natural gas was residential and commercial heating. And then we had some electric generation as well. But if we fast forward to today, electric generation and LNG exports, they make up around 50% of the demand on a daily basis. With our, as Kevin mentioned, we have $100 million that we estimate to spend this year to cover our customers' costs in Montana. And while the majority of that load happens during the winter, amazingly, the majority of that supply is purchased during the summer. And the reason that is because we have such a large storage position that we purchase natural gas in the summer and then use it to serve our customers during the winter. So of our 22 BCF that we anticipate to purchase this year, over 70% of that will be purchased during the summer months. And I guess what we're trying to show here is even if the prices fall off during the winter, we've purchased the majority of that supply already. So it's certainly going to have an impact on customers' bills. Each year we file an annual natural gas tracker filing with the Public Service Commission at the end of May, and just detailing for the supply portion only what those impacts are going to have for customers. 3 to 4 years ago, we were in the mid $2 range. Last year, we were in $3. And then for the supply portion this year, it's $5 and almost 60 cents. In addition to, or I guess with the increase in natural gas prices, we are communicating this to our other stakeholders as well in South Dakota and Nebraska. And there's a thought amongst the natural gas marketing industry and even the analysts that they say, right now we could be seeing a natural gas pricing change where historically we've seen natural gas price trade in North America. Now there's a potential for it to be more of a global market with a bunch of natural gas going over to serve Europe and over to serve Asia. As I mentioned, those prices are significantly higher than what we're seeing now. And if we were to see prices in Montana and South Dakota and Nebraska go to $25 or $30 per decatherm, clearly that would be devastating for our customers. So we've reached out to those stakeholders and changed the way that we purchase natural gas in order to mitigate those risks for our customers. I guess I'll pass it over to Doug unless there are any questions.
In fact, we bring gas on at both ends. Add to that, fire some gas production up in the Ever area. Cost not based on market. Electric gas program. Gallagher was a big fan. Good news is. Bad news is they didn't. Since then, there are limited opportunities to make this program has fallen out of favor. Real lesson about the value of scarcity and against price.
You know, I quite a bit of breaking up. I can only get a couple of words here and there.
Commissioner, I didn't say anything all that memorable, but I'll get to the microphone if I jump in again.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Luke. Moving forward to the mid-sea market prices, which Montana customers get a lot of the market exposure is from the mid-sea. And if you look at the mid-sea curve, it is quite volatile up, especially in the peaking months of the summer months and winter months. And if you look at the price curve there, back in the start of May, we were at over $200 for the August. And right now we're about 150. So, if you look at what is happening in the electric markets, it's very similar to what's going on with Luke's business with natural gas. And natural gas is on the margin. And the electric prices have been just following what's been going on in the natural gas market. This next slide kind of shows the exposure that we will have this summer. And if you look, the red bar on there for July and then for August, you can see we're exposed to the market right about 148 megawatts and 193 megawatts on average. That's average loads, average generation on our system. So we're looking at about 148 megawatts of exposure there, which is about 15% of our total. But if you look, what kind of keeps me up at night and the rest of our crew is when we get to a summer peak, those numbers increase greatly to about 495 megawatts, which represents right between August and July, about 35 to 40%. We're going to be exposed to the market. Okay, getting to the customer impacts. Okay, next year, our bills will increase by about 7.3% due to an under collection of the PCAM. And that'll be the total electric bill so it'll increase about 7.3%. And if you apply these market purchases to the same amount of energy we purchased last year in the first 6 months of the tracker period, we're looking at about a $21 million increase in market. That'll impact the customers quite a bit. And if you look at, what type of influence that we have no influence on what these market prices are. As Kevin always tells us, we are market takers, not market makers.
You know, to add one final note to that, Doug and Luke, we talked about our presentation this week and what we wanted to say and how we were going to do it. And these two came up with this. I cannot take any credit for it, but the concept is right now we have no ability to hedge. We have no ability to lock in certainty for customers, reduce risk to do anything in that regard. Now we have an open docket where we have proposed a hedging program for the electric supply, and we think it is the right thing to do. And so we talked about how do we get that concept ahead? What would be a way to make a logical suggestion of what hedging would do? And these two came up with this concept, and it's a real life concept. Right now, if you go out to buy a gasoline, it's $4.89 a gallon. Okay, that's what you pay. If I said to you, I will give you the right to buy gasoline next summer, 2 tanks, half of your supply or a quarter of your supply, at $3 a gallon. You got to lock in and do it. No matter what the prices are next summer, you have to pay $3 a gallon. Would you do that? And that's the question we posed. That to me is the value of hedging. Locking in, these prices are high. They're set to go back down. We don't know for sure they're going to go back down, but we have a chance to create that certainty, to reduce that risk, take that off the table. And that's why, as we manage these markets and these presentations, we think the ability to hedge is an important concept.
Questions, Vice President Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple for Luke. How much, Luke, of this upward pressure on price that we're seeing is a result of increased demand, both domestically and internationally, and how much of it has to do with constraints on domestic production of natural gas?
That's certainly a great question. It's tough to quantify, as every one of those factors account for the increase that we are seeing. We're in the process nationally of trying to increase demand, but it's certainly not coming as quick as everyone would like.
All right. Well, that's a follow-up, Mr. President.
Yes, go ahead.
That's an uncertainty that none of us welcome, that's for sure. And Doug, to you, I was frankly surprised. We've almost become accustomed here of late to see projected load shedding or rolling blackouts in California during summer peak. I was frankly a little shocked when I read that MISO, kind of the granddaddy of system operators, has put together an emergency plan for that same strategy this summer during peak. What's your best guess? Is Montana going to be able to escape that that outcome, at least for this coming summer peak season?
I would not want to be in the position to say that would never happen, but we've been very fortunate to be able to have access to energy, bringing it in from the Pacific Northwest and other points on our system, and we also have some ability to bring some stuff down from Canada. So I would say that's a low risk. I would never want to say it's never going to happen, but I feel pretty confident that we're going to have the energy on our system to meet the needs of our customers.
How does that situation change if we see a 2025 shuttering of Colstrip 4?
Mr. Vice President, I'll jump in on both those. The situation you're asking about was specific to the summer. We face severe peak exposure, as you know, both winter and summer, and in fact, in many months of the year. Part of it is a function of the generation that's available in the market, but also increasingly as while Montana is a net exporter, At many times, Montana has become increasingly a net importer at peak. And as a result of that, the transmission system becomes more and more important. And the transmission system for moving power into Montana, as Mike Cashel and his folks will tell you, is severely constrained. So that creates the risk that we're describing today is more of a price risk. But yeah, we have had situations because of our unique exposure to the peak market. We have had situations where it's a pretty wild ride, even from an availability perspective. And this is a concern we've been highlighting going back, as you know, to our 2015 electric supply plan and Montana's unique exposure to that market. Specifically to Colstrip, the answer is that Colstrip is darned important. It's an important asset in the near and intermediate term to serve Montana. It's also a very important asset to maintain stability of the grid in the Billings area as other resources have been shut down. Brian, I think you wanted to add to that too.
Yeah, I would. Two things. First of all, back to your first question, Vice President Johnson, was associated with the supply and demand. My immediate answer to you was yes. It's going to be my only answer is it's both. I think what we've seen from a production standpoint during COVID, certainly production was shut down. And I have to tell you, I think federal policy certainly focused people to not necessarily expand their production. So on the supply side, that has been a bit crimped, if you will. And then on demand, coming out of COVID, the demand in the states itself, and then as Kevin mentioned, more of a global market, demand's increasing. And so I think one thing we forget about is you maybe heard earlier in the presentation, we haven't seen gas prices like this since 2008. And obviously what we've been able to do in the United States in terms of natural gas production have benefited of our customers greatly for a number of years. And so now we're seeing some of those dynamics change, and it's obviously impacting pricing. So I'm sorry to go back all the way to that question, piling on in terms of Bob's comments. I mean, one of the things that we've been trying to do is expand capacity. We understand we have a capacity shortage here as a company. We've been working on things to try to alleviate that issue and continue to try to take steps there. In the meantime, this group right here, led by Kevin, felt like, we're not moving fast enough to build capacity here. And they've gone out and entered into capacity contracts to protect the company and primarily customers from not just, it doesn't necessarily always help from a pricing perspective, but more importantly, it's just actually getting the power when we need it. And so I think this team here has done a fantastic job of really protecting customers.
I appreciate that. And last question, Mr. President, would be this. It appears to me that there's probably going to be increasing reliance on what we hope are enhanced markets through EIM and EDM or some version or combination thereof. There are requirements for utility to qualify for participation in those markets. Would this accelerated closure of 4 and the loss of that capacity jeopardize Northwestern's ability to qualify for participation in those enhanced markets?
The specific answer, I think, is that's quite possibly the case. And your question reflects how much thought you've given to regional transmission issues. So again, back to the discussion in fortnightly, I really do appreciate that. What the commission should know is that we are very involved in all of the regional efforts. In fact, this morning we had a really good discussion bringing in all of the various regional efforts that are going on. Those are all helpful. And going back to your original question, pretty much every market mechanism depends on you bringing your resources to the market. And that's very much the case with CalISO But also, we were in South Dakota just last week doing a ribbon cutting on a new plant in Huron. We participate in SPP, the Southwest Power Pool in Huron. We're very happy with it, but we have resources available to serve our customers, and then we dispatch those resources efficiently through the market in order to get the very best pricing for our customers.
Appreciate that. That's all I had, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, my questions, my interests align nearly perfectly with the Vice President in terms of supply and demand and the cost. I think it was said earlier that 50% of the gas usage now is electric generation and LNG, especially for exports. And of course, you know, we may have domestically more natural gas than we could possibly use in the next 100 years. However, it is constrained, like electricity and transmission lines, with the capacity of pipelines to get it to different places. I'm not aware of any major gas pipelines being constructed in the anywhere around Montana. But what does concern me, and it was brought up in the application of Hydro One a few years ago to purchase Avista, is that having entities, utilities in this nation reliant upon energy sources from another nation where the politics can change dramatically is very, very concerning. Given that Party General Secretary Trudeau has indicated quite an admiration for the governments in China and Cuba that are highly efficient because they're dictatorial, that can make me feel very, very uneasy if I was relying upon fuel sources from Canada coming into this country that might be curtailed at any time in the name of climate change. How does the company feel about that?
I'll take a crack, and I think Brian may want to speak to that as well. First, going back to your comment about gas generation, we have currently very little gas generation on our Montana system as a proportion of generation. In fact, California has a lot more gas generation. We've brought on about 740 megawatts of non-carbon generation since 2011. Dave Gates came online just before that. And then, of course, you know, we're building the Laurel plant. So, and we use gas generation as an efficient way to keep the system in balance and meet peaks. So that's just a footnote. In terms of Canada, we've got very good relations with our partners immediately to our north. I'd say both public sector, but particularly the producers. It's always good to have, first of all, to have multiple sources of supply. We're pleased with that, and it's good to have whether you're talking gas or electric production. It's really good to have production on your system. On the gas side, that can involve owning gas production where we have opportunities. I sure think we should be pursuing those. It can also involve expanding supply. It's one more footnote. Our gas demand on our system is increasing at the same time that gas is being used much more efficiently by end-use customers, which is a good thing. But customers use gas wisely, but they do very much for good economic reasons want gas.
The only thing I would add on top of Bob's comments, from our perspective, we have electric and gas transmission capacity issues in the state of Montana, and we need to address those issues ourselves. And I think we also have to have less reliant on other markets Commissioner O'Donnell, it's not just Canada that you don't necessarily want to have over reliance. It's on other states. And so we need to, it's great to participate in markets. We've demonstrated that it can help us keep our costs down by participating in EIM, for instance. But we also have to make investments here in Montana to protect ourselves against, hey, we're seeing issues that happen elsewhere in the US that can impact us. And so we need to also make sure we're able to run our own system, if you will, when times call for it.
Well, thank you for that. As I recall from my first month on the commission, when the company had a gas rate case, is that it seemed to me that there was two supplies into the state of natural gas, one from Canada, one coming from Colorado through Wyoming, and that you had a couple of gas fields in the northern part of the state, but they were rapidly being depleted pressure-wise. So I'm wondering, we have, I'm certain that you guys have a friendly relationship with MDU, but they're a gas company as well, in terms of production and all of that. How secure is the gas transmission, the pipeline capacity into Montana? I'm thinking that in terms of Canada, is that at any time it would seem to me that the climate alarmists like to do things on a very immediate basis, and that I would not be terribly surprised if all of a sudden the Parliament there decided to ban all exports of natural gas in the name of climate change. That to me would be a very risky type of thing. So I'm just concerned about the again with Vice President Johnson. I'm very concerned, and Mr. Rowe echoed this with the continued existence of Colstrip on the electricity side, but on the gas side, it just seems to me that we're not self-sufficient on that, and that gives me pause. If somebody would care to comment or not.
I think my earlier comments, Commissioner, are consistent with your basic points. We're very fortunate to bring gas onto the system, both at the north and the south ends. Our transmission system is a key asset, and there are some needs and opportunities to expand that. Having gas on the system is a very, very good thing, both in terms of reliability. We wish we had a lot more. And as you noted, the nature of a gas well is that it does deplete, but also in terms of price. And when we purchased gas, and this goes back to Chairman Gallagher's comment at the time, we were making an investment in a long-term asset. We weren't trying to in any way outsmart the gas market. So we paid for that accordingly. But boy, compared to where prices are now, those were screamingly good deals, and customers, to the degree we're serving customers from that production, it's just the same story as the hydro system. They're paying for gas based on the cost of production, not based on crazy stuff happening in the market.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, yeah, I recalled the question that I had before, and if I might go backwards a bit, in terms of when I was first acquainted with your forest fire management program, it had to do with widening the clearing zone of transmission lines, basically, as I recall, doubling the width of them from 100 feet on both sides to 200 feet. And it seemed to me to be very, very helpful to the firefighting for the state of Montana, in that those would create perhaps create very helpful fire breaks. I wonder if that has actually benefited that, or if fires just ignore that and they don't serve any fire break purpose at all.
Since my fire team isn't just jumping right up here to answer this question, I'll take it myself. I don't think the intent here wasn't necessarily to stop the fire break. I think the video you saw demonstrated how we widened the right of way. But I think it's quite clear if you're in a fire system or a fire, and with winds that we've seen that really continues to produce these fires, I have a hard time believing that those right of way widening would help us too terribly much from a fire break perspective. But if I've got someone from the fire team who wants to push back on that, I'm more than happy to hear from them.
Thank you.
This is John Carmody. We
ahead.
are working with the Forest Service and have sat down with them on a number of different times from a statewide modeling. If a big fire starts, they've actually looked at our right of ways and said, is there a synergy, just like you're talking about, of doing some individual work on right of ways in strategic locations? At this point, we're still talking with them at it. Nothing has moved forward, but that concept is out there, as is in other states are looking at the same thing. So that would be the way I'd look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Question for you, Bob. So you were mentioned in your response to Vice President Johnson's questioning that the transmission system is constrained in situations where peak demand might require importation of power. Can you build on that? Talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah. In fact, we would make sense, I think, to maybe revisit some of the conversation with Mike Cashel. We have our primary transmission system is designed to move power within our Montana service territory. There are various transmission paths out of Montana, very weak to the east. The major transmission path to the west is the Colstrip line. And that line was built specifically to move power from Colstrip to the Pacific Northwest. It's also an important part of the backbone of our internal Montana system. The capacity to move power out of the state, just as a function of the way the line was designed, is greater than the capacity to move power into the state. There are additional paths out of Montana. Those are because there are other transactions moving around the West. Those paths can also be fairly constrained. And in some situations, Kevin can probably speak to this, putting together those contracts Kevin has described that help manage customers' exposure to peak. It can be touch and go getting the transmission path. So that's the problem. And then what do you do? It goes to Vice President Johnson's comments about the Western market. A lot of that is just how you organize things. What are the opportunities to get more access on existing transmission lines? What are the opportunities to increase the power that's flowed through those transmission lines? And FERC has long-term strategies around dynamic line rating and things like that. Can you build transmission? Can you build additional transmission in existing right-of-ways? Or the tougher proposition is to build more, particularly interstate transmission in new rights-of-ways. We had, as you know, our Mountain States Transmission Intertie project to connect to Midpoint, Idaho. There are various other projects around the West. All those can be helpful in terms of getting power into and out of Montana, in terms of meeting our needs, in terms of supporting development of various resources in Montana. But ultimately, all those things have to be looked at together. But think of the Eastern Interconnect as more of a bowl of spaghetti. It's fairly dense. Western Interconnect, long lines, generally pretty far apart in terms of high voltage.
I'd add to that, and obviously can let Kevin jump in here too. As I mentioned earlier, we have transmission constraints with both gas and electric within the state of Montana. But as Bob talked about, the paths coming in and out of the state also are a constraint. And here's the issue: as we continue to develop markets in the West, we continue to flow power so we can optimize, and from a price perspective and a utilization perspective, that interstate transmission is even that much more important. The problem we have, we were just talking about this issue today. We were talking about supposed transmission projects that are in construction. Some of these have been in construction, and I'm putting in air quotes for some time. They're still really in the planning stage, and so we really need to move quicker. I think on an interstate transmission perspective in the Pacific Northwest, and also as a result of not have to totally rely on that, we have to also do some things within Montana to make some investment there as well. Kevin, if you want anything.
The only thing I would add is if you look at what it was like 25 years ago, Montana was a huge exporter of energy. It was no problem. You did it at Garrison with Bonneville and it was done. If you wanted to import, not many people wanted to import when 3,000 megawatts were being exported. Today that has changed because we don't have all that generation on system. So we must compete with those other folks who want to bring energy into the state or want to move it that way. We've had to get very creative in how we're going to solve our capacity issue. We've had to look to the north. We've had to look to the south. We've had to look through systems where we might have to have even two wheels to get it in. And we've done those type of transactions just because it's no longer a slam dunk.
With your permission, I'll go a little bit farther, and I'm violating the rule. You only answer the question you're asked. But
no, I appreciate this conversation because, as we certainly talked about, Bob, and certainly as I've tried to alert the ETA committee, our oversight committee, this is a growing concern and importance for not only you as a business entity, but also us as a regulator. So please continue.
Exactly. Two broad points. First, all these folks are responsible for buying energy for our customers, our retail customers. Are on the electric side, the balancing authority we operate is responsible for keeping essentially the whole state in balance. Rural co-ops do a really good job meeting the energy needs of their customers. The industrial sector is responsible for its own needs. But there is, as Montana grows, as load in Montana grows, as businesses expand or relocate here, the energy needs in the state of Montana are greater than the energy needs just of us serving our retail customers. But we're concerned about that from multiple perspectives. The other theme related to that is the broad notion of capacity. And one of the things Brian's doing a great job with as COO is bringing together the different parts of the company to talk about what are the real capacity pain points facing Montana. How does electric transmission, gas transmission, electric generation, even distribution all come together? Where are the areas we need to collectively focus? Whenever we have those meetings, I think basically I wish everybody in Montana could hear what's going on in the room because it is incredibly important.
I would echo your comments right there. It's been my experience since being on the commission that when I go out and speak to folks about what we do here, generally the average Montanan understands the capacity crunch. I don't think they understand the importance of the transmission piece of that and the problems that we face for becoming a net importer of energy. Certainly that's a different scenario, Bob, than you faced when you were on this commission. And it's one that I, as president, would certainly like this commission to focus commission's work more on and on. And as you know, each of you know, I have gone to ETIC and requested additional FTE to try to be able to adequately staff this commission to engage in these dialogues. As the vice president has perfectly pointed out, we need to be a part of the regional transmission and generation conversation in Montana, or else we're going to fall behind.
it is extremely important. I appreciate the commission's focus, governor's focus, the Department of Environmental Quality. We all need to row together in the same direction.
I appreciate that. Well, I've got you guys for 15 more minutes. So Bob, if you're willing, would you mentioned the den fire, so would you mind giving us
Yeah, I think actually Kurt is the, oh, okay. Yeah.
you want to give us a 3-minute
Sure.
update?
Yeah, we've been very, very engaged up there since the fire occurred. I think most of us have spent time up there just really working with the community to be sure their needs are dealt with appropriately and respectfully. Jason Merkel, who heads our day-to-day distribution operations, has spent a lot of time in Denton. So we're trying to do the right thing there. As you heard earlier, fires occur not just in forests, but in grasslands as well. And that's a lesson about simply paying attention to the whole system. I don't know, Brian or John?
No, I think the only thing I would add is I think, the recovery effort there was extremely impressive. Obviously, we had our role, but the community and others also had their role. And I think for those folks that would come to Denton today, they would see quite a bit of change from when the event happened. And so we feel grateful that we've been able to participate in more ways than you typically see probably utility contribute to that effort. But we're very, very pleased with the recovery efforts this far.
I do also want to recognize that the governor did the right thing in going up there right after the event, but he also went up 6 months later, and that's unusual.
All right. Vice President Johnson or Commissioner O'Donnell, any final thoughts or questions?
Nothing else from me, Mr. President, other than to express my genuine appreciation of Northwestern, not only for the time today, but for what really has been some stellar performance in the face of some very challenging circumstances.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My phone has told me at various times that I was muted automatically, so that's the reason we're asking. I wanted to comment on the last thing that you, Mr. President, were saying just a minute ago, and that is that it has occurred to me within the last year that this commission, my experience on it for 5 years, has been that we are reactive to various applications for rate changes or all sorts of different things, and that I see now that we need to be much more proactive on the whole thing, which is, I believe, to echo your comments on there. We need to be have a wider view. It is our responsibility. I guess it might be fair to say shared with Northwestern to provide for adequate, reliable, affordable service. And we cannot build our own gas plants or electric plants or anything else like that. And so therefore we need to do all that is within the authority that the legislature had given us, which is limited, to encourage that and to basically to protect the people of the state of Montana from the ravages of both, as Mr. Rowe pointed out, very strong peaks in summer and in winter. So we get hit both directions, and we need to be absolutely sure that we can do everything that we can do to provide adequate power to protect the people of Montana. So I think, as I say, this was not any of the presentations by any of the speakers here were not window dressing. They were not PR events in order to mollify the commission. They displayed, to me, very convincingly, a true dedication to the goals that they enumerated, and that they consider themselves to be a very responsible player in Montana. And I echo Vice President Johnson and President Brown to say that I really appreciate the attitude of Northwestern and all that they've presented today. Thank you.
Bob or Brian, you want to do any closing?
I will just say that we really value these opportunities, and as you saw, everybody worked very hard to get ready. The questions and the discussion from all of the commissioners were just exceptional and right on target. So thank you all very, very much.
Waving off.
All right, I'll take it.
All right.
You egged me on there a little bit. I think just these sessions, I think certainly I'll speak for Bob and I. We're pleased to have these sessions because we can demonstrate, the quality of employees that we have and the dedication they have into everything they do for this utility every day. And like I said in my earlier comments, I don't think any of us could be any prouder in terms of our response this past week in terms of the activities. But I think this just demonstrates what you see throughout this organization. So any chance we can continue to speak with the commission about things that we're working on, and importantly to you, President Brown, things that you guys think are important, anything you need from us to come in and talk to you about, we're more than happy to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And with that stated, thank you for your time, Bob and Brian, and the rest of your wonderful staff. Thank you for appearing today at the commission and giving us this briefing. Helpful, I think, and as I stated at the top of my remarks, also extremely timely. So with that being said, we'll finish 10 minutes early. Nobody ever objected to finishing early, correct? So I will conclude this informational meeting.